existence. Remember, study of existence, study of reality. We are focusing more on ontology. You see, because now the idea is that you are challenging the existence of Allah. You don't believe Allah existed. You don't believe God existed. So when you have this kind of idea, that means it's a challenge of ontology. Okay, next. Which aspect of Tawhidic epistemology has been challenged now? Our body has a lot of false and non-functional structures. It should be S there. Thanks to evolution. They have no purpose. They have no purpose at all. All vestigial organ, all masalah, kita semua tak ada function. Semua datang by itself. Or false. To be in worst case scenario, they say it's false. False design. Okay, T, Masya Allah. Oh, my boss is here, Masya Allah. Boss pun kau masuk dalam ni. Apa, office belah je, Masya Allah. Okay, Dr. Arifin is there. It's teleology. Teleology. Right? Simple. Senang. Tak susah pun. Okay. Next. The Quran and Hadith contains error. Contains error in describing human anatomy and physiology. Therefore, it should be rejected as sources of knowledge. Or I can make it more. I can say that there are things that mentioned in Hadith or mentioned in Islamic sciences not compatible, should be rejected as a source of knowledge. This is cannot be accepted. This is backdated. This is barbarian, blah, 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 and so on and so forth. So which epistemology has been challenged here? As a source of knowledge, that's the word, right? It should be epistemology. Okay? Now the final one, which is easy. Muslims should remain neutral. There's no such thing as Islamic values. All are universal, golden rules. We can decipher using our mind. No need for any sources outside. So, yeah, there's no ultimate values. Okay, here we're talking about axiology. Yeah? It's pertaining to ourselves, pertaining to the person that we interact, and it can pertaining to the process involved. Okay? So, Alhamdulillah, is axiology. So, it's easy now. That is Tawhidic epistemology. Kan, semua cakap susahnya, tak faham lah apa. This is Tawhidic epistemology that we call it the EOT framework. Although there's one more, cosmology, but I just, for the sake of beginner, I didn't put it here, cosmology. Cosmology, okay. Now, sekarang we go for the next part. The next part here is that we're going to understand the elements of Tawhidic epistemology. Kan, kita dah bincang overall. Now we go to one the element, which is the Tawhidic epistemology. And when we understand, this is very important. If we understand this, inshallah, we have a better idea how to classify knowledge. Because the problem in the Muslim world, especially in scientists, they conflict things. Okay? They conflict things. They do not know. When you conflict things, then you don't know. Your question is wrong. I'm going to show it later on. And you do not know what is what. So we're going to mention. So there are three things. Number one, we have what we call the empirical, the one that use our senses. Second is rational. And third is the revelatory, which is our textual. We're going to go one by one. Empirical knowledge. What does it mean when we mention about empirical knowledge? Ladies and gentlemen, empirical is very simple. Whatever you derive the data based on your senses, based on your observation, based on your hearing capacity, based on your talking, based on speech, based on your smell, based on your touch, your senses. So when you have all those your senses, you derive a certain data. So when you have a certain data, you can see some patterns, you see? Either it's up, it's down, or you can see, you can observe, you can see that what is happening. What is happening, right? So in science, you can go much more further by scientific methods. We have the hypotheses, we have what we call the scientific methods, which actually derive from the Muslim world, Ibn Haytham. Ibn Haytham is the first one. There's a story behind this. For those who like science in Islam, you can go for history science of Islam. How does Ibn Haytham actually develop these scientific methods? yang kita buat dalam kita punya research. Usually you have your hypothesis, you have the research objective, you have your methodology to answer all of each of your hypotheses, and then you come up with the results and etc. This kind of scientific methods is not by the Western world. It started from us, Ibn Haytham, and there's a story behind this, especially during the time in Egypt. They call Ibn Haytham to solve the king called Ibn Haytham to solve the issue of the Nile River. Nile River is keep flooding. And initially, I think he was in Baghdad, he went to Egypt. So he did not know the expense of the Nile River. When he saw the Nile River, now it's a bit tough for him. And because the Sultan is very tough. If he cannot solve them, the Sultan is going to kill him. So what happened? He faked himself, thought to be like a crazy person, and he was put in the solitary confinement. So in that confinement, he saw lights come from the room. So he did some experimentation later on, and later on came the book, the Kitabul Manazir, the book of optics. And from that, actually, he developed the scientific methods. Okay, that is history of science. So basic point is that whatever you use senses, okay, whatever data that you derive from your senses. Now, ladies and gentlemen, let me ask you very frankly, can everything measured by senses? Can everything measured empirically? They call it empiricism. Not everything can be measured empirically. There are things that beyond our empirical world. For example, the doctors, they can measure your heart rate. They can measure all the neural signals, your EEG, your MRI, and etc. But the pain, they have the visual scale for pain, yes, 1 to 10, etc. But feeling pain, they can do that? No. There are things that existed, but we cannot empirically test it. We can have some approximation qualitatively, but we will not know the reality. For example, love. You're loving your children. Can you measure your love? Or maybe by giving more money, by giving more, you can measure it qualitatively, but not quantitatively. So there are things that we know is existed, but we cannot measure. I always make this kind of contoh, inner voice. All of us have inner voice. Some of us talk to ourselves, but don't do it publicly, and people think that you are crazy, you saw someone talk to yourself, Sometimes I do it to articulate my points, but not in front of people, So you talk to yourself. Even now, when you're listening to me now, some of you might think this is a very boring thing, a lot of philosophy and etc. Some of you might think this is very excited. I never think of this before, So you have your own idea inside your mind, but do you really can measure it? We cannot measure it, but you know it happens. So in philosophy, they call it qualia. For those who follow philosophy, can read about it. But qualia, they are subjective experience that we know is existed but cannot be measured. For example, dream. A lot of us have dreams, Some of the dreams become true. Can you measure the dreams? You can measure all those waves coming to your brain, the sleep wave and etc. But you cannot measure your dream. So love, you can measure oxytocin level become high, mashallah, your heart rate bumping, especially for those who are getting married and etc. It's like your first time going to meet someone, Wow, a lot of things happen, Kita butterfly in the stomach, But you cannot measure the butterfly. That's the thing, So the thing is, there are things existed we cannot measure. So if you know this, then you're not going to ask how you measure God. God cannot be measured in this thing. God not physical. See? So asking can we measure God is wrong empirically. Now next, rational knowledge. This is important, mashallah. This is important. So when you have data right now, you only have, actually what happened. You want to know how it works. You start connecting dots. You start making sense. Now you need to have rational thinking using your brain. So, for example, in science, you have a lot of data, you try to make inferences, which I'm going to mention later on. So, in laws, in Islamic tradition, we have what we call the ilmu mantiq. So, in ilmu mantiq, you learn how to articulate, how to make a certain proposition, a statement. The statements either be correct or false, not in between. So, a rational statement, sometimes you put it in what we call sequence. We call it syllogism. I'm going to mention. But some of it not by any type of formal logics, but you see there's a pattern. For example, 1 + 1 = 2. This kind of statement, do you really need to go lab, try to do demonstration? One phone plus one phone. How many phone? One plus one equals to two is already ingrained in your mind, right? But of course, what is that one? Maybe one phone ke, that one is different story. And in rational thinking, for me, rational is more than logics. Logics follow certain sequence. Rational is beyond that. And there's a separate discussion on that. But point to be taken, there are certain laws that in philosophy that we mentioned about A equals to A. For example, the law of identity. Dr. Yusof is Dr. Yusof lah. Dr. Ashraf is Dr. Ashraf, kan? Kita tak kata Dr. Ashraf is Dr. Yusof unless you have something at the back. Kan? Tak ada. A equals to A lah. But at the same time, kita akan kata juga, cannot be contradiction. For example, I cannot say Dr. Ashraf is sitting and standing at the same time. Boleh ke kita buat macam tu? Pening juga kan? Kalau kita cakap, Dr. Ashraf is male and female at the same time. Can we do that? Now it's become problematic. And transgender is different thing. When you become transgender, either you have both, or in one particular position, you need to decide either male or female. Yeah. So you cannot sit and standing at the same time. No, you cannot do that. There's a contradiction. You cannot say that one and two at the same time. So there are certain things in our mind that you don't need to have your senses. You can put it on your mind. But before we go for the rational judgment, but there are things that it can appear in our mind, but it doesn't happen in reality. Kan? For example, if I imagine Dr. Ashraf, sorry, I always mention your name, guys, your name. So Ashraf is riding a unicorn to kuliah. I have the idea of Ashraf. I have the idea of unicorn. I can imagine he riding the unicorn. But is it happen in reality? I hope don't, Dr. Ashraf. It doesn't happen in reality. And even there are things that happen in reality, but it doesn't happen. Things that appear in reality, but doesn't happen. For example, illusion lah. Yang tu the problem with the empirical tadi. Kita nampak, tapi sebenarnya dia tak wujud. So there are things that only appear in your zihin, in your mind, doesn't happen in reality. You see, there's a limitation of it. There's a lot of limitation of it. And there are things that we cannot fathom, but does not mean contradiction. For example, if I ask you to imagine the highest possible thing in this world, can you do that? And for example, if I think, let's say I myself, I try to close my eyes and start thinking, my room is the most thing, the biggest thing. Then comes to the question, what's beyond that? So your mind cannot go. Kita kata kita besarkan sikit lagi. Can we want to make it more bigger? Then what's beyond that? So our mind cannot really fathom on infinity. It happens in mathematics. It happens in calculation. But in reality, something that cannot fathom by our mind. Kan? So not everything can be understood, can be imagined. Simple thing. This is the problem when you believe all of things are only by empirical. You see, number 9. For example, if I ask all of you to imagine number 9 in your brain. If I dissect your brain, can I find that number 9? I cannot find it number 9. It's a perception. You see? So for those in deeper understanding, you were thinking that how is it possible the material, the brain can produce mind? They couldn't think about it. So it shows to us, this is the ontology. There are more reality in what we think existed in this world. So kalau kita boleh think on this thing, why can't we believe in Allah Subhanahu Wa Taala? You see? Okay, now next. Okay, yang ni kita belajar sikit hukum akli. This is important as well. For those who are studying the Ash'ari theology, especially in Sanusi, Imam Sanusi Muqaddimah, very good, mashallah. So in Sanusi Muqaddimah, Imam Sanusi, he has what we call hukum akli. What is things that considered as wajib according to your akal, what is possible, and what is impossible. Okay. Of course, in our rational thinking, there are things that we need to understand. Is it necessary? Necessary means that it must be there, cannot be negated, cannot be challenged. For example, 2 plus 2 equals to 4. Okay, there are things that possible, mungkin, either you affirm it or you negate it. For example, you say it might be rain tomorrow, it might be happen or not. And the third one is that cannot happen. Cannot happen by akal. For example, you are asking, can we create another God? Can Allah create another Allah? Na'udzubillah. Tak boleh. Itu yang kita belajar kat sekolah. Hukum, sifat mustahil bagi Allah, sifat yang jaiz bagi Allah, sifat yang wajib bagi Allah. Itulah penting belajar maksudnya. Point to be taken is that there are things that you cannot fathom with your mind and it's impossible to happen. Kan? For example, a triangle with four sides. How is it? You mention triangle, but you mention four sides. Macam I kata, congratulations. I saw someone in the mosque, I say, a married bachelor. Can I say that? A married bachelor. It doesn't make sense, kan? If bachelor means not married. If you are, unless for, okay, there's another interpretation. For the guys lah, kan? They might be married to one and bachelor to others. I'm not going in that tangent. There is the very sensitive tangent, and then a lot of axiology akan coming in. But point to be taken is that there are things that you mention and it's impossible to happen. Okay? Okay, mari kita buat sikit latihan. Simple je, very simple. Okay, you can voice out, no problem, or you can just type it for those who prefer not to. Mana pula chat saya ni? Sekejap. Okay. Yes. First question. If you, it's necessary, possible, and impossible. If you want to type it, you can type it N, P, or I. If you want to voice out, you can voice out. The sum of parts of a thing can be greater than whole. Necessary ke, possible ke, impossible? These statements. Which one? Oh, saya tak ada bawah, tak nampak jawapan. Simple kan? It should be impossible kan? Because how is it possible if you have like your chair kan? Your chair inside the room. So definitely your chair is smaller than your room kan? Or lesser than your room. So the sum of parts cannot be greater than the whole. It's like you cannot fathom in your mind. So impossible, impossible. Okay, next. Ini best. This is relevant in US, not much else, because US they have a lot of taxpayers paying for NASA expedition kan. Extraterrestrial life existed. Possible ke, necessary ke, impossible? Okay, a lot of you say possible. Alhamdulillah, possible. Okay, matter takes up space. What do you think? We talk about matter kan. Okay, put aside the theological discussion in Ash'ari school. There was a discussion about matter doesn't, there's no come for matter, but there's different. Because matter in theology and matter in physics is different. Okay, we're not going to discuss on that. So matter takes up space. That's like take up space. This one you need to talk to the physics because even in photons there is discussion whether photons are matter. Kan, photons they don't have any mass. There's a discussion on that. Okay, matters take up space. Necessary. Okay, correct. The creation of cosmos. What do you think? So can the cosmos exist or not exist? If you say it's able not to exist, then it becomes possible. You say that no, cosmos must be existed. No, there's no right or wrong here. Just to open your mind. So some of you might say that no, this creation of cosmos is considered as possible because it can not existed. Allah can create other things. Okay, fine. Okay, next. I am literally older than my father, which is I can't imagine that. I put the word literally because if I don't put literally, you can put like majas. For example, you might say no, in terms of thinking and etc. So I will put the word I am literally older than my father. It's impossible, kan? Siapa yang cakap possible tu mungkin ada masalah dengan ayah dia. Then next, a human can be 1 mile away from the sun and not burn. Let's call it 3. What do you think? Impossible, impossible, possible, possible, impossible. Okay, now, when you look upon empirically, it's impossible because you see that everything burns. But when you put akli and syar'i, akli said maybe there are certain mechanisms you do not know that can do that. And syar'i, you can do that if Allah wills. For example, in the case of Ibrahim alayhis salam, the fire cannot burn. Kuni bardan wa salama, the words in the Quran, right? Allah asked fire to make it cool. So in syar'i, which means based on revelation, that is possible. In akli, can be possible because of different modalities, but in empirical, Not possible because usually when you see, when you observe, you are going to burn. Kan? So I put it possible. Okay, a square circle. What do you think? Supposedly I remove the picture kan, so that you have. If I put the picture now, it become biased. Impossible because either a circle or square. I'm not saying that you impose both. Either a circle or square, so become impossible. Okay, this is a tricky question. God existed. Good, mashallah, because we have the conception of God, so we believe God is necessary. Good, inshallah. Of course, I'm going to discuss further in our discussion on the principle later on. Okay, then, alhamdulillah. That is what we call the al-qadiyah, or in mantiq, there was discussion about whether certain statements can be right or wrong. It cannot have intermediary. Kan? This is for those who learn ilmu mantiq, for example, Matan Isaguji is a good introductory text. You can learn how actually we classify things, I mean, the rational, the type of judgment that we have. Now, in terms of logical thinking, to go further, I like to this. Yes, wajibul wujud we're going to discuss, definitely, Dr. Sina, inshallah. Now, ladies and gentlemen, so the next part is that two types of logical thinking. This is important as well. So, ladies and gentlemen, there are few ways of us to make sense of things that are happening in our world. For example, a very basic understanding, we call it the deductive reasoning. Deductive reasoning is very simple. When you have a general statement and you apply it to a specific case and you make a conclusion. For example, every living things going to die or will die or mortal. No, that's the wrong things. I'm not going to living things. I'm saying that every human is mortal. Selamat sikit. Every human is mortal. So Yusuf is a human. Therefore, I'm a mortal. Every human, mortal lah, betul lah. Maksudnya matilah, kan? Mati. Setiap yang hidup, setiap makhluk pasti mati. Saya ada makhluk, maksudnya saya mati. Kan? Simple, very simple. But sometimes, if you arrange it wrongly, this is like we call it syllogism. When you arrange it wrong, you arrange it correctly, but the premise is wrong, or the premise not coherent, it might be having wrong understanding. For example, saya suka buat tajuk, saya suka buat contoh ni. I'm not sure whether some of you knows. Lembu minum air. A cow drink water. Yusuf drink water. Therefore, Ashraf, you don't say Yusuf is lembu. Yusuf is cow. You say that, I'm going to leave this. I'm going to leave this. Okay. So the problem is that this is what we call a fantasy. Though it's correct, a cow drinks water, I'm drinking water. But to equate that I'm a cow is wrong. You see? Unless if I say, cow drinks water, I'm a cow, therefore I drink water. That's correct. You see? This is what we call deduction. And actually, deduction is a very strong, a powerful argument. I will do it later on. I will show it to you. It's a very strong form and it's very difficult. And science usually not deductive. Science is inductive. Why? Science is based on observation. You see a pattern and you start make a conclusion. You see? And it's bound to interpretation. It bounds to falsification. It bounds to change. For example, if I say, I saw one white swan. Swan, what answer? And the next day, I saw another swan. I went to Agomba, I saw another swan, white swan. I go to different places in Malaysia, I see a lot of white swans. So finally, I make a conclusion, all swans are white. Oh, swan is susah. Kita make cat lah, cat. I see one white cat, two white cat, many white cats. I make a conclusion. All those things are white cats. But someone wants to disprove me, just bring a black cat. That's all. That is in falsafa, they call it falsification by Karl Popper, but we're not going to mention that. But to mention to you, the scientific explanation of things are based on inductive. And the third part, which is inferences, best explanation or abductive. Abductive is very simple, not even science. Every day we do it. For example, if I say, let's say now, in our chat, how many members in our chat now? We have like 290. Let's say we put 300 in this chat room. If let's say 100% left. So logically tells you 200%, right? Okay, for example, in one room, you are outside of the room. You are outside the room, there's one room inside. In that room, you know there are 3% already, 5% inside the room. And you saw 3% came out. So your logic tells you the best explanation is that only 2% inside. Now, I'm not saying right or wrong. I'm not saying right or wrong, but logically, the best explanation, you have 2% left. That is abductive thinking, or we do inferences. Looking at observation, you make certain inferences. Okay? What we call, okay. And nombor 4 is strong as well. We do. And this is very much in fiqh. In fiqh, when you have, for example, in school of fiqh, your discussion about what is hukum asal. You have hukum asal, hukum fara', you have illah, and you make conclusion. To make it simple, for example, there are things that happening here in our world, new issue, for example, AI and etc. You want to make sense what the hukums of AI. So you want to see, is there any hukum or any similar things that happened in the past during the time of the Prophet, during the time of the scholars. So you try to see whether is it compatible with the ilah is the same, the reason is the same, and you come up with the hukum. Simple example, if you say like tobacco or drugs, right, or vape and etc. They try to relate the illah and then make a hukum. Usually those in Islamic, they use the analogical reasoning. Kias, kita panggil kias, but we're not going to discuss this. Okay, I know some of you, Alhamdulillah, is a good idea, but of course, this is a beginning level. Some of you are very good in philosophy. You might have a different idea. Of course, we can open up the discussion later on, Alhamdulillah. Now, the third part, we discussed about empirical, we discussed about rational, third, we discussed about revelatory. So, revelatory knowledge is very simple for us to understand. It's just whatever things a claim that mentioned, we only know that claim because of Quran and Sunnah. And if Quran and Sunnah is not there, we do not know at all. We only know because of Quran and Sunnah. So it's by divine revelation, it's beyond experimentation, and your reason alone cannot decipher it, cannot know about it. Because if reason alone can know about it, then what's the purpose of sending messengers? Okay, so we accept that based on the authentic revelation. But in understanding revelation, usually scholars do the qat'i and zanni. Those in Gombak, they have better understanding of this. There's some mistakes in the slides, but inshallah, just to be simple understanding is that either is qat'i, which is what we call qat'i in English, what we call it. Apa qat'i dalam English? Kita panggil apa? Kalau zanni is speculative, probable, certainty, certain.
Certain.
Yes, certain. So when you are very certain, when you have a higher level of certainty, very certain, they call it qat'i. But if you are probable, speculative, or definitive, the word is definitive, is zanni. Now, zanni is speculative here. It's not like the speculative that, like us, like shark or zan or what. That is different. Speculative here means that the level of the source are not the same. There are possibility of that source is false. For example, the mawdu' hadith. People fabricating hadith against the Prophet. But we don't have the fabricated Quran, no. Right? Quran is qat'i in terms of source. Second, even the source is authentic, the understanding of the source. Is it have only one meaning very clear? Or it can open for interpretation. We call it zanni dilala. So either zanni subut or zanni dilala. For example, believing Allah is one. This is qat'i. Qat'i in terms of subut, qat'i in terms of dilala, the explanation. Why? Because whatever happens in the world until the day of judgment, we only believe in one Allah. We cannot change that. Right? But interpretation-wise, for example, in terms of fiqh, there are things that can change. Certain halal can become haram, or certain haram things can become halal in certain conditions, certain situation. So you use dalil, you use fiqh, you use usul fiqh to derive a certain jurisprudence. You have some speculative in terms of understanding. A simple discussion, for example, when you touch a woman, is it going to your wudu? What happened to your wudu, right? In Shafi'i mazhab, no, it's batal. In Hanafi mazhab, no. So that kind of interpretation, you can open for a different interpretation. This is on niyat. Okay, done. Very simple understanding. I think those for you are not going to further on these things. So basic idea, when you will combine all these things are interrelated. I'm not saying that, so don't get myself wrong. I'm not asking us, when we say that we put three things, we are separating them, we are, totally differentiate them. No, they are interrelated. Point to be point to be taken here is that we put things on its place so that we know what are the limitations. And when we don't ask questions not belong to that domain. Okay? And the question whether revelation part of knowledge, that is ontology. Can. But when it becomes a source, it becomes epistemology. Simple. I'm not going to push much on this. So we can see that Quran has a lot of empirical observation. So when you go to Quran, for example, very basic understanding, simple. Definition of science is that when you do a systematic investigation of the cosmos, of the environment, and on yourself, when you have a systematic investigation of this following scientific methods, that is science. So you have rational, you have empirical. So in Quran, we have a lot of empirical observation. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, for example, in Surah Zariyat, chapter number 51, verse number 21, وَفِي أَنفُسِكُمْ أَفَلَا تُبْصِرُونَ, and in yourself, then will not see. Not only that, the common verse in Surah Fussilat, chapter number 41, verse number 53. Sanurihim ayatina fil afaq wa fi anfusihim hatta yatabayyana lahumul haq annahu al-haq aw lam yakfi bi rabbika annahu ala kulli shay'in shahid. We will show them our sign in the horizon and within themselves they become very clear to them this is the truth. So the basic idea of the Quran is an invitation for us to observe empirically, to reflect rationally, and to come out with the truth. That's the basic understanding of the Quran. And second thing is that not only empirical, it's a challenge to rational. For me, this is the most strongest form of rational thinking to derive to the existence of Allah. Ayat ni lah. In Surah Tur, chapter number 52, verse number 35. Am khuliqu, a'udzubillahi minasyaitonir rajim. Am khuliqu min ghairi syai'in am humul khaliqun. Or they were created by nothing, or they were creators of themselves. Now, ladies and gentlemen, to make it very clear, we existed in this world, right? We existed in this world. Now, the existence of us is possible, which means we can exist, we also could not exist, correct? We can exist, we can wujud, or we also able not to wujud, kan? Maksudnya kita boleh wujud dan tak boleh wujud, tak ada masalah. But in reality, we already existed. So when we already existed, we have a beginning, right? So once we existed in this world, the question comes to us, and we have the beginning. Once we have a beginning, who actually initiated the creation? Only two possibilities. Either you were created by yourself, or you were created by others. Simple, kan? Either you created yourself or you created by others. The first option is absurd. You cannot create by yourself. So the possibility that happens next is that you will be created by others. So you were created by others, and that thing created by others, that thing created by others, it shows that you dependent to others. So once you dependent to others, this line of dependency cannot go forever. It requires a cause, and it must end to one entity which is independent. I'm going to explain this further. Okay? So if I put it in deduction method, I will say that everything that begins to exist is either created themselves or created by others. That's my deduction statement. But we know that creating itself is absurd. Therefore, we are being created by others. No, we stop here. I'm not saying it's God or what. That's a separate story. That's a separate discussion. No, logic has limitation. We can use logic and rationale to derive the existence of one God. But there are limitations. There are things that cannot describe the sifatullah, the attributes of Allah using our akal. That's we require revelation. Okay? And the Tawhidic for us here, not to go to that realm in deep. Right? which I'm going to mention later on. Saya tak masuk lagi ni. Dah sejam dah. Okay, bismillah. Now, again, kita buat testing. Saya sengaja buat test supaya kamu tak tidur. Masya Allah. Now, let us do some, based on all our discussion just now, on the type of judgment, rational, empirical, revelatory, let us do a simple activity on the type of judgment. Now, very simple, we do it fast. Water boils at 212 Fahrenheit. This is a US framework, they use Fahrenheit, we use Celsius. So is it rational, empirical, or revelatory? Empirical, simple. Done. Tylenol or paracetamol relieves pain. You can test in the lab. So is this? It is? Okay, relieves pain. Okay, fine, it's empirical. Okay. Force is mass times acceleration. F equals to ma. This is a bit tricky. I put it empirical, but Rector's actually corrected me. Prof. Osman is a mathematician. He said it's rational because you can derive F, you can derive M, you can derive A. We put it in a sequence of equation, it becomes rational. Okay, fine. We put it rational empirical. Okay. Paradise exists. What kind of claim? Rational, empirical, or arbitrary? For those who don't believe in paradise, don't believe in the significance of paradise, then actually it's revelatory because we know paradise based on Allah's command. But you can try to make sense of paradise based on logical argument, based on moral argue. So some of you might put it as rational. Humans will be resurrected. It's a claim that actually made by revelation. Okay, but we can try justify it. What's the need of having a resurrection, maybe for ultimate justice and etc. Some of you might think it's a rational claim, but actually it's a claim by revelation. God exists. Ini menarik sikit. Actually, it's both claim, revelation and rational. We can decipher there's a one entity being called God. We can, no, rationally, you can have what we call necessary being. But is that necessary? Is Allah? That is, you need a relation for that. And some even say that Muhammad SAW is rational because it's rational for God to send messengers. There's nothing wrong for God to send messengers, right? And of course, we have Muhammadur Rasulullah mentioned in Quran and Surah Al-Fat. So it's also a revelatory claim. So I'm not saying that this framework is totally, this is the way we think. MashaAllah, good. Alhamdulillah. Okay, now I'm halfway through. What is the approach we use? Now we go for the second part. Baru saya nak masuk ni kan. Ladies and gentlemen, there are two ways of doing integration. Simple. First, whatever you teach in class, whatever your subject matter in class, you have your syllabus, you have all the weeks line in your course outline, and you try to relate it with Quran and Sunnah or any understanding of Quran and Sunnah, right? So you have your substance, you try to relate it with Quran and Sunnah. Second way of doing is that, this is usually in Gombak people, not from real knowledge, but we can do that as well. When you use text, scriptures, and you see the statements of sign I mentioned just now, Afala yanzuruna ila al-ibili kayfa khuliqat, looks upon the camels, how they've been created, looks upon the cycle of rain, looks upon the creation of human beings, like nutfa, halaka, idham, etc. You can see a lot of scientific phenomena in Quran. So they say that you look Quran, you see the information, and you try to integration. Now, for me personally, the second part is a bit tricky. It's not as easy as we think. And even Prof. Osman mentioned that we don't like to do ayatism, which means we just take one verse, take another verse, match, make it the same. And some scholars like Dr. Hamza Andreas, I think Dr. Hamza Andreas came to Gombak and gave a lecture on these things. It's just like become what we call the fallacy of undistributed middle. Like we mentioned just now, can a cow drinks water, I'm drinking water, so I'm a cow. So we see that there's a mechanistic, there's a process happening in science. Oh, similar with Quran, so it's similarly 100%. Not necessarily in that way. Okay, I'm not going to go that further, not for the purpose of this lecture, but I'm giving you some idea. So what can we do? What can we do? For me, I'm focusing more on Tawhidic enrichment. There are 6 principles I'm going to mention, and a little bit of discussion on doubt neutralization. There's a certain doubts happen in our course that we can try to neutralize, but we don't go very deep for all. And what kind of methods we can use? This is the method that we can use. We can use lectures. We can use flip classes, we can use PBL, we can use case studies, we can use assignments, we can use reflections. There are many means of applying this. And I'm going to show some of the examples. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to next. Now, actually, I'm going to the topic, mashallah. Dah lagi sejam ni lagi kan. I'm going to the topic. Topic here now. Okay. This is the 6 principles that, inshallah, I'm going to explain in brief, in simple, which especially relevant for those in science campus, may be relevant for those in non-science campus. For example, some of the practical. And we're going to mesh this in those study of the framework of Tawhidic. For example, teleology, axiology, epistemology, right? We're going to mention about it, inshallah. Let us go one by one in which I hope you are still awake, inshallah, another 45 minutes. So, of course, in that particular, you can put it on your weekly topics, assessment, course outline elements, course synopsis. When you do academic review, you can add up here and there as part of either it's become infused, either it become embedded or become integrated. Okay, let us start. Okay, before I start, ladies and gentlemen, just to mention, for me personally, the most strongest verse in Quran that reflects Tawhidic epistemology is Surah Al-Ikhlas. Surah Al-Ikhlas as the most powerful way of understanding God. In brief, it tells us that Allah is one. And Allah does not depend to anything. Allah is Samad. And everything depends to Allah. Allah does not depend to anything. Lam yalid wa lam yulad. Neither begets or not born. Because once you start begetting, when you start born, then you are dependent. Right? Allah is free of all those things. And walam yakul lahu kufuwan ahad. There is nothing like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah existed, but Allah has attributes, but those attributes, those existence is not similar with the creation. This is the ultimate explanation of a necessary being. Allah is self-cause. Allah does not require any other causal dependency, and is self-purpose. And it must be one. We're going to mention why. Because Quran mentioned in Surah Al-Anbiya, chapter number 21, verse number 22, لَوْ كَانَ فِيهِمَا آلِهَةٌ عِنْدَ اللَّهِ لَفَسَدَتَا. Right? If there is any other than Allah, then the world going to ruin. Because when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has a will, Allah has a power. And we mentioned that Allah is ultimately power. So you cannot have like two entities have ultimately power. Then you have contradictory. For example, if I say there's one God that once the session start at 9 a.m. and he's the most powerful, I cannot say that I have another God which is also most powerful, but he wants the session to be 9 p.m. It's not possible. Because when you say the ultimate, the most powerful being, it must be one. Cannot be more. Okay? Okay, simple. I'm not going further because I only have about 45 minutes left. Now, ladies and gentlemen, let us go to the first concept. Belum masuk lagi. Ladies and gentlemen, okay, now we talk about necessary being. I think for those who are coming from Islamic background, those who learn Aqidah, Wajibul Wujub, Mumkinul Wujub, this is nothing for you. It's easy for you. But for us, how do we understand this? Now, ladies and gentlemen, very simple. Everything that existed in this world, we call it contingent. Now, contingent ni bukanlah maksud dia contingent Olympic ke Sukan Asia, bukan. Contingent here means that things that depends to others. Things that depend to others. One. Second, they are not permanent. They are destructible. They are destructible. These two basic definition. And third is that they can be anything. They can be anything. For example, me myself, kan, I can be anything. I can be dark color, white color, but I end up in this color, mashallah, alhamdulillah, kan. So the thing is, it can be anything. But it depends to the others. But the line of dependency must end to one entity which is not dependent. We call it necessary being. Now, macam mana kita nak faham ni? Simple. Let's say, I want to borrow a pen from Ashraf. Ashraf lagi, mana Ashraf? I cannot see Ashraf anymore. I lost the screen. Yeah. Okay, I can see. Oh, mashallah. Can. So Ashraf, I want to borrow a pen from you. And I just mentioned whatever I can see here. Ashraf, but Ashraf said, no, I only can borrow to you when I get when I borrow from Dr. Noraini, for example. So Dr. Noraini said no. Dr. Noraini borrow from Dr. Ain Nur Azhana. Dr. Ain borrow from Asim Shahida. Asim, Dr. Asim. Dr. Asim borrow from Samsul. Borrow from Mazlan. And this go on and on until infinity. Now my question is that who owns the pen? If the act of borrowing follow without stop, then the question is that who owns the pen? There's no owner because you keep borrowing until infinite. No, there must be the one person that owns that thing so that it can borrow those things. Can? That's one way of understanding it. Second way, let's say you enter your house. You saw chain. Kan, rantai. Hanging. Rantai to hanging. So when you say a hanging chain, you know that one chain connected to one chain, connected to one chain, connected to one chain, it must end to the ceiling, correct? You cannot have fathom, oh, this chain goes forever. It goes forever, it cannot hang. You see? Okay, I'll give you another example, like Imam Al-Ghazali mentioned. For example, you go to the end of the ocean. You go to the ocean, you go to the beach, can go to the beach with your families, doing picnic, etc. When you see the sea, you know that those sea has seabed that holds it. It depends to the seabed, right? Do you see the seabed? You don't see the seabed. But you know logically, you cannot say it's infinitely. The sea is infinitely. No, there must be dependency. Okay, for example, let's say again, I want to shoot Dr. Ashraf. Again, mashallah, I want to shoot Dr. Ashraf. Dr. Ashraf for the sake of example only. Jangan ambil serious. Yeah. Recorded, just Dr. I want to shoot you, you frame that, I'm going to end up in lockup. If I want to shoot Dr. Ashraf, but in order for me to shoot, I need to get the permission from director of CPD. And director CPD say, you cannot shoot. I need to get the permission from director. And the director say, I cannot shoot. I need to get permission from the minister. If this go on and on until infinite, can I shoot Dr. Ashraf in the end? I cannot shoot. So we cannot have the line of independency. It must stop at one necessary being. That is the idea. That's the basic idea. So that's the idea what we call contingency argument or dependency. In Arabic, they call it iftikar. Iftikar, dependency. Of course, there are a few discussion here and there, but I'm not going to discuss that. Am I losing my slide, Dr. Ashraf? Dr. Ashraf?
Yeah, it's still okay. Yeah, we can see it.
Oh, I'm not sure what I press. I cannot see the slide.
I think there's two tabs. So somehow you change from the meeting to maybe something else. So you can go back to the meeting, the tab,
Ah,
the meeting.
sorry,
Sorry, meeting. Oh, sorry. Or maybe Muhammad Yusuf's screen. Just now.
Ah,
Yeah. So
kalau saya stop share dia akan hilang tak?
if you stop share, then everyone cannot see it. But now there will be, if you just hover your mouse up to the top, so there'll be two tabs for the Zoom. One is meeting, the other one is Muhammad Yusuf Muhammad screen. So if you click on that one, so you'll be able to see what everyone else is seeing.
Okay, let me see. Itulah tangan ni gatal. Dia memang tekan je. Kejap. When I scroll my slide, kejap. So saya masih tak nampak macam nak tukar ni. Dr. Aisyah. Now the thing is, you are mentioning, let's say if I share it again, boleh ke?
Yeah, boleh. Okay, no problem. Yeah, if you want to just unshare and then, okay, share it again.
Okay, let me share it again. So I'm halfway through, insyaAllah. Sikit lagi. Okay, now you can see, right? Alhamdulillah.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, good. So that's the idea of contingent must end up to the necessary being. Of course, we don't make jump for necessary to become Allah. This is a separate argument. But point to be taken here is that there is a necessary being. And it makes sense of whatever actions that we do. Now, is it the idea made up by scientists? Is the idea, the first idea is coming from Ibn Sina actually. So this is text from Ibn Sina, Ar-Risalah Rashiyah, Aqaid Ibn Sina. So he said that فَهَذَا الْوُجُودِ إِمَّا ممكن الوجود وإما واجب الوجود blah blah blah, and at the end he said that فإذا ممكنات تنتهي بواجب الوجود. Point to be taken here is that the contingent beings must end up in necessary beings. And I found out that this particular idea of wajibul wujub and mumkinul wujub is accepted by all theologians. Only the specific details is different. For example, Imam Al-Razi in Ash'ari school of thoughts have these ideas, and even in school we learn about these things. The wajibul wujud and mumkinul wujud means that wajibul wujud, the necessary being, it must be there. The mumkinul wujud, the possible existence, like us, because we can exist or not to exist, right? But in the end of the day, they existed. Or when they existed, they are power, they are drive that makes us exist, which is external, which is a necessary being, and it depends on others, and it must stop. Simple. That's the idea of this. And even in Athari school of thought, Ibn Taymiyyah, he accepted this. The only thing doesn't accept it, and the idea is that because the necessary beings, according to Ibn Sina, has some problems in terms of the attributes, which is not the focus of this particular workshop. Now, simple. Sekarang baru kita masuk. First, baru kita masuk, kan? Alhamdulillah. When we understand the concept of that, we can apply it. Simple. For those in science, you know that we have lots of, in 11 system on our body, in anatomy, in physiology, etc. There are so many things, so many reactions happens. And we know that one of the elements depends to the others. Kan? For example, here, the arrow from atoms to myself, usually I put others, but this time I put myself, alhamdulillah. So from the atom, me, myself, in order to make me, the system or digestive system, for example, it depends to the formation of certain digestive system. That system depends on organs. That organs depends on tissues. That tissues depend on cells, on organelles, macromolecules. We can go on and on until the start of the existence. You see? And even the atoms, in order the atoms to form to become molecules, it must arrange, it depends on its arrangement. So in the end of the day, you can see that, mashallah, this level of dependency, if we can observe it in all our teaching. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who disposes of all of us. So how do we do assessment? Very simple. We can do like short question. First, you can ask them to do some description, the anatomical hierarchy, for example, explain briefly on the anatomical hierarchy, start from the cells up to the human being, to the organism. And second, you can put sub-question in short question answer. Describe the concept of dependency, for example, based on Tawhidic epistemology. Can? Because you already explained in class, now it's for them to explain. Let them explain in the examination. So that's first principle. So saya akan cepat sikit, because dah ikut aku setengah. Now, second, this is common, mashallah, the argument of design. William Paley in Western Worlds. Some people say that argument of design is inductive, not very strong. I'm okay with that. But this is a beginner level. I think this is good, mashallah. This is a common argumentation or common idea when we see about creation is complexity. When you see a complex things, that suggests a designer. Simple, kan? For example, in our body, mashallah, we have a so complex system. Talk about one system, nervous system itself, 86 billions of neurons. Each neuron got 10,000 synapses. And that neuron can even do rewiring. We call it neuroplasticity. It works 24 hours. So that is about nervous system. When we talk about genetics, subhanallah, there's a calculation going on based on what kind of cell you are calculating it and how you do the calculation. For example, we have trillion number of cells. So we take one cell, kita strip off the DNA, keluarkan DNA dia, kita take it off, we put it on, the size of one particular DNA is about 2 meter. This table, 2 meter. That is one of size of one particular genome. So imagine trillion of cells. And as if your journey to the sun 70 times. Okay? And if you are hardworking enough, you can try to recite one letter of DNA per second. It'll take you 24 hours a day, up to 100 years. Which is I don't think we're going to do. Even Quran pun kita tak baca kan. Sebahagian kita, na'udzubillah, apatah lagi nak baca DNA. But point to be taken here, that's the idea. When you talk about Quran, in Quran, talking about complexity, you can see that in the creation of human beings, Surah Al-Mu'minun, starting from nutfah, alaqa, idhama, lahma, see the ending of the verse. Fatabarakallahu ahsanul khaliqin. Allah is the best creator. Because when you see a complex things, your mind, logical, rational thing, no, there is a designer. And you're not going to ask, Who is the designer of the designer? It's an absurd question. Just because, for the sake of argument, there's a designer of the designer, that does not negate that all things that happen require a designer. Faham kan maksudnya? Sebab ada orang kata, kalau kita believe that there's a designer of a designer, so who created God? They were going to ask these things. It's an absurd question because God by definition means that's not being created. Kind of like bachelor marriage tadi kan. So let's say for the sake of argument kita believe there's a designer of a designer, then there's a separate things to discuss. We don't ask, for example, we don't ask who's the Yang di-Pertuan Agong kepada Yang di-Pertuan Agong. No. We know Yang di-Pertuan Agong is the highest in the country. Correct? So similarly, when you have the complexity of creation, it actually leads us to a creator, which is intelligent, mashallah. So we can actually observe in our syllabus what actually very complex. So from that, we come up with an assessment to relate ourselves with the complexity of creation. For example, a simple OBA, one base answer assessment. Kan? For example, in this case, senang je kan soalan ni. The complexity of nervous system from a Tawhidic epistemology perspective primarily encourages. We can put one question, understand level CLO1, if you're putting on the course learning outline 1. So the answer is very simple. You can see that B is the correct answer. Okay, we don't claim that Quran serves as a textbooks, and we don't claim that this cannot be measured by science, and we don't claim that this is by chance. Kan? For those who have a sane mind, know that complexity things that happens cannot be by chance. For example, if I'm a simple, if you go to your respective kuliah, to a lecture hall, you saw on the screen there's a letter A, N. And when you saw on your laptop, you saw on the laptop, you see one pen, hit the button A. So you know that by chance, this pen might be somewhere falling off, hitting the button A, then you see button A, very simple. But you come to the next day, to the same lecture hall, and you see, mashallah, beautiful slide presentation, fully arranged hall. Your mind tells you, this is not by chance. It cannot be all those things come together and start making the hall ready for presentation. Right? And human body, cosmos, is much more complex than the lecture hall. So we can bring this in class, mashallah. Third principle is the order and precision, or we call it fine-tuning. And Quran mentioned in many places, "Inna kulla shay'in khalaqnahu biqadar." That we created everything according to its qadar, to its predestination, according to the precise measure. And we observe this in the creation. There are lots of precision. For example, we can see certain mutation happens only at certain parts. And for example, the concept of homeostasis in biology, when you have your blood pressure going up, your body mechanism reacts to make it down. When you are hypo, then your body mechanism needs to go make it up. So what happens is that unless if it's haywire, then you need all the intervention, medicine, and etc. But under normal circumstances, our body tries to maintain balance. The concept of al-mizan. And there's one thing that I want to mention later on. Before that. So we can see that the precision that there's a paper on this. The precision in creation is either the position where you posit certain things, the interaction, for example, enzyme and substrate. Enzyme and substrate must be like a key unlock mechanism. It must be there at certain time, at certain level, and certain timing. So all these things, mashallah, suggest to us is a precise measure. It cannot come by chance. Because a lot of factors there. And for those who are coming from chemistry, there's a field of knowledge of balance and measure. Call it, it's very difficult for me to pronounce it, stoichiometry. Many places when I try to mention it, I got slip of tongue. Stoichiometry, the study of balance. In pharmacy, you have a lot of titration, a lot of things happens. We know that in equation, you must balance the equation, right? If the equation not balanced, something wrong there. In mathematics, some of you might put constant and etc. But you try to balance certain things. So when dry subjects, talking about mixing, talking about balancing, you can add up this Tawhidic perspective. We call it balance, measure, al-mizan. And even we know that certain things not reach to certain level cannot happen. For example, in action potential, you know that when you reach threshold, then you have all those synaptic activity, muscle activity, and etc. Just want to share to you, and this is like just throw off, though not part of our teaching subject in IUM. I'm not sure. We don't have cosmology in IUM, or maybe for some physics. You can appreciate this. You know, the level of fine tuning in the universe is remarkable. After 400,000 years after the Big Bang, they talk about our universe is about 3.8 billion years. They were talking in that paradigm. So you can see that if the universe has some density. So the density, if it become lower, then it's too diffuse. No stars can form. But if the density become too high, the universe will collapse in 7 minutes. Subhanallah. Variation can only happen 0.001%. One part of 100,000 variation. If more than that, become too dense, less dense, the universe cannot sustain. So use our mind. When we do examination and formatting, we format our exam, right? To become more precise. Itu pun ada error kan? Kan? Sometimes masuk dalam department meeting, we have been bombarded kan? So imagine the world, the universe. So this cannot come by itself. It must be governed. It has a necessary being. Now next, what can we do in the assessment? So what can we do? You can look upon in your task of 14 weeks, there are certain mechanisms you are talking about. Ask them to describe it. Ask them which part of the fine tuning, and ask them to discuss, to present what happened if those precision is disrupted. So you can make like a group presentation. You can make like a case study, a present. Of course, now the students, a lot of them use AI, so better to have that presented in front of you. I'm okay with using AI, but as long as they understand the concept. Okay. And subhanallah, number 4 is the wisdom in creation, the fourth principle. This is very important, ladies and gentlemen. Quran mentioned in many places. For example, in Surah Al-Sad, verse number 27, وَمَا خَلَقْنَا السَّمَاءَ وَالْأَرْضَ وَمَا بَيْنَهُمَا بَاطِلًا ذَلِكَ ظَنُّ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا فَوَيْلُ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا مِنَ النَّارِ. We did not create heavens and the earth aimlessly, between them aimlessly. That is the assumption of those who disbelieve. And really, in our modern world, we do have like the greatest atheists in our time now, Richard Dawkins and etc. They were mocking us. They were mocking the biology, in science, who believe in certain structures. According to him, certain structures have errors. And we also sometimes believe that there's no function, kan? Our body has no function. Actually, there is a function, but either we know or we do not know, or either it's major or minor. All of our human body. I just want to relate you what happens in the last century, in the early of 90s. There were a German scholar who wrote a book on vestigial organ. Organs mean vestigial structure means structures have no function. Believe in our human body have no function. So they say that even at that time, pituitary gland, the master gland, was considered as no function. You see? But as science develops until now, we know that pituitary gland is the master gland. So how can you claim this is no function? It must have a function. Either we know or we do not know. Of course, I don't have time to go this in detail, but we give some ideas on things. And mashallah, this is another thing that I think we can venture through. And I don't see anyone doing this, but inshallah, we can do this. We see things that happens in our body, and we take ibrah from that, lesson from that. Subhanallah. Can. For example, like for those in physiology, anatomy, you know that there's a certain laws. We talk about the Wolff's law. When you put stress on your bone becomes stronger. Can you see the Shaolin in temple, you do training on punching, the knuckles become stronger. Yeah. A lot of bone activities having that. And this we can apply, this is axiology part, you see. You see that our body have been stressed, and when they overcome the stress, they become strong. Similarly, in life, when we are being pressed, a lot of things happens, we overcome that, we become better. Inna ma'al usri yusra, wa inna ma'al usri yusra. So we can do this, we can give some ideas, and this can go on and on. Can? For example, the next part, apoptosis. Usually, we study in class, we say that this is cell death. And people start asking why the cell die. For what reason? Why don't we tune it like sacrifice for the betterment? And cell apoptosis is a programmed cell death. For example, when you are injured, you have a lot of inflammation happening in your body, a lot of debris. So some cells undergo necrosis, some of cells going into apoptosis. They're going to remove all those dead cells, and you are going to regenerate and having regeneration. And in a study mentioned, in one paper mentioned, without apoptosis, you might have like your intestine can go on up to 16 kilometers. Can be compressed into your stomach, kan? And you can have a tones of bone marrow, for example, if no apoptosis. But when we channel this in Tawhidic epistemology, under the idea of Allah's wisdom and the idea of exology, it becomes better. It shows to us the idea of sacrifice for a better function even happens in our own body. You see? So in your subjects, you can try to apply this. If you see something that you can learn from those particular subjects related with the concept that we discussed in here, I'm sure. Okay, this is another thing. I try my best. Ladies and gentlemen, the most strongest intellectual attacks on Islam is on the theory of evolution. We can discuss this in different settings. The main idea is that they say that because you and the chimps, you and banana, and you and all this organism share the common basic, what we call genetics. You and chimps, 98% similarities. So because you and chimps, 98% similarities, you and chimps coming from the common ancestor, they call it LUCA. Local, universal, common ancestor. Moyang yang sama. So lepas ni kalau pergi zoo, nampak chimps, boleh kata, Masya Allah, brothers, we are same. No, the thing is it true? Is it true that when you have similarities means you're coming from common descent? It can be yes, it can be no. For example, if you go to Brazil, you saw someone looks like you, can you simply say, oh, we are brothers, we look the same? No, right? We can say that it's homologous, but not necessarily common descent. It can be yes, it can be no. The counter is that we call it homology. Not homology, homoplasy. Homoplasy means yes, you can have similar functions, but not the same identity. Okay, but I'm not going to go further than this is another separate discussion. Point to be taken here is that we channel our mind to say that this is ultimately Tawhidic in terms that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created similar things, different arrangement forming different organism, but it comes from the common creator. So it is not common ancestry, it is common creator. Allah used the same things and arrange it differently, having a different organism, but it comes from the common creator. Why? Because if it comes from different material, it might suggest you have more than one God. Faham tak? For example, we see proton car, not a lot of proton variants, right? Different variants, using same materials, different variants. Come from a similar proton company. But if you have a different material whatsoever, it might suggest you are coming from different company. You see? So we channel it differently. We don't not talking about either common ancestry, right or wrong. We are talking about subhanallah. That's the level of mashallah similarities. Okay. In my case study that I did in US with students from US and etc., I do a very simple way of understanding. Ladies and gentlemen, there's another shubha on these things. Coming from those people who attacks Islamic ways of understanding creation, they say that it's not about no structures having no function, but structures error in function. Okay, time does not permit me to discuss all, but point to be taken here is that they take example the design of the eye. They say that if you can see, notice on the screen again, you can see that the octopus punya eye ni, the photoreceptors. Photoreceptors means the light transforms to electrical signals. It must go to the photoreceptors. So those photoreceptors are located in front. So light hits the photoreceptors and go back to the optic nerve. Very smooth. Tak ada blind spot. Tapi in our human eyes, we have blind spots. For example, you see that the photoreceptor located at the back. It must curl in front and goes to the optic nerve. To compromise this structure, you have blind spot. So dia kata sotong lagi bagus dari manusia. This is the error of design, and to the worst case scenario, like Richard Dawkins and some of the people say that this is stupid design. Auzubillah. So we can make this as a clinical scenario, like I mentioned here. Kan? We mentioned we are ahsani taqwim, the best creation in terms of physical function. Is it true? Is ahsani taqwim means superiority in physical or akal? So time does not permit me to go to all the detailed answer, but point to be taken here. What does, when you say error in terms of what? Our design of eye similar to the eagle. And our photoreceptors are meant to be more, to sustain more. Sotong cannot live more than 20 minutes on the land. Unless it become food lah in anak ikan bakar. The thing is sotong or Octopus vulgaris. You put it inside this lecture outside, put it inside this Zoom. After 20 minutes, it dies. Because it cannot sustain high UV light, etc. It was created optimally to live underwater. That's the creation by Allah. For us, we created optimally in this particular world. Okay, that is about sotong kan? About eye. There's other ways. For example, some people might argue why you have junk DNA. Some people might argue why actually you need vitamin C, but you cannot produce it. You must take it from your diet. Okay. Further, some might ask you, you have prepuce. Tahu prepuce? Kan? You are born, you have prepuce. Then you kena sunat, buang. Tanya, kenapa Allah cipta something, structures, later on you buang? No, to ask kenapa and kenapa, is it necessarily must be coming from scientific explanation? It can be theology. So we can relate Tawhidic epistemology in terms of ibadah and etc. You see? So the way you understand Tawhidic epistemology, all those three parts, enrich the way you share with the students. Okay, let's say for the sake of argument, there are things that we do not know. When we teach to our students, in our subjects, there are things that we do not know. And it's normal. It's normal for us not to know everything. So the fifth concept, we call it epistemic limitation of human knowledge. Because Allah is the all-knowing. Why? We have finite human senses. Even the human senses can deceive us. Like I mentioned to you about illusion, right? And we have finite human reasonings. There are things that we cannot fathom. And finite scientific instrumentation. For example, we do comparison in science. We only do with certain assumptions to create models. You are comparing with the chimps and humans. You are comparing a certain genome. Then you make up so you already have the assumption beforehand before you make the comparison. And science can change. For example, in this world, you're following the Newton's law, right? Just break something, gravity goes down. But when you go out, Einstein's story is better. Gravity is like more than that. Not only on something goes down, it's a space, wave, and etc. You see, explanations enrich. So we cannot simply say, oh, do not know means it's absurd, you need to neglect it. No. This is our own limitation. And I can give you an example. This is an example by NASA themselves. You see, NASA themselves. They were talking about, they were like mesmerized. They were like thinking, after 13.8 billion years after the Big Bang, at a certain point of time, suddenly there's an energy that drives the force. And they do not know that energy. They call it dark energy. Dia bukan racist. Tapi memang sebab they call it dark energy. But point to be taken, there are certain explanations. They cannot see empirically. They do inferences. And you can even study about dark matter, the non-observable universe that holds the force. So it shows to us, there's nothing wrong for us not to know. If someone tells you, you cannot measure ruh, so what? Ruh is not a scientific claim, it's a theological claim. We believe in ruh, that's okay, that's fine. Like you cannot justify about your mind. Now some people say, you believe in the hereafter, it's absurd. You believe in multiverse. Can you prove multiverse? You cannot prove multiverse. It's a scientific inferences. So you can believe in multiverse. Why can't I believe in the hereafter? And this can go on and on. And this can go on and on. And finally, ladies and gentlemen, the sixth criteria, we talk about impermanence of creation. we can discuss this further, that everything, every function, everything that happen in this world, though it follows certain laws, but it goes degeneration, for example, decline. It it actually can go for disease susceptibility, and it can go entropy, become disorganized. Can though always the example I give is that when you park your car in the Korea, you come back after 100 years, what's going to happen to your car? Your car not going to be the same, kan? Because it undergoes disorganization. Why? To reflect ourselves that we are not permanent. If we are permanent, we have the complete kamal, the complete perfectness, then we claim to be God. Nauzubillah. We are contingent. We are not necessary being. So Quran mentioned kullu man alayhi fan. Right? When and at certain time we are going to be. So ahsani takwim in surah tin must be read together with this particular verse. So how we do? This can be done as a reflection. So when we told the student, do some reflection, think about it. Take any system that you have. Look whether it's permanent or not. The other word of impermanent is temporality. Temporality. So connect it and try to reflect it. So you can now reflect with axiology. You can reflect that why we need to become takabur. In the end of the day, we are going to die. Why we challenge Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? In the end of the day, we are not permanent. So when we put all of these things in context, we can do some reflection with the students. Okay, nak habis dah sikit lagi ya. Banyak sikit ni kan. So the idea is that if you notice, all those six principles can be attached in those domains. Kan? And you can, I send it, this is very one page. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I'm not saying this is the complete things. We got other things as well we can incorporate, but this is an effort for us. So for example, you can see all those six principles. You can try apply those in your course. You can try even think what kind of method you want to use. You can use flip classes. You can give some ideas, some cases. And I would really encourage for those in Gomba, especially in Islamic studies, use some PBL method, like the one we did in Kuantan. Give some case. Give some guiding questions. Ask the student. See how they present. See what's the thinking. Make it like a better. And that's actually the methods of the Prophet. You see a lot of hadith narrated by Prophet SAW based on problems. People come to the Prophet, ask questions. So it's a problem-based learning. You see? Then you can come up with the proper questions and assess the students. So I'm really sorry, I couldn't really put the map and everything on MQA. That is required KCA to do it. But I hope I done the justice by trying to share whatever things under the Tawhidic epistemology. So in brief, very simple. We started the idea just now with what is Tawhid. And we start with the EOT just now. All of the logis. We start the idea of integration. And then we go about the meaning of knowledge. Then we try to make sense of Tawhid. Remember, Tawhid leads to the oneness of Allah. That's why I did some emphasis on the ontology part, the existence of Allah. Then we go each of the principles, we relate with whatever we teach in class. Then we try to do some reflection. Assessment, which correspond to the teleology part, they correspond to the axiological part. So, ladies and gentlemen, TE is not only making people have good adab, which is good, axiology, but the conception of Allah. Because we can have a good person, but in the end, they sacrifice their belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is very bad. And we can have a person who believe in Allah, but have no adab. So it comes hand in hand. Okay, inshallah. Yes, I think I stopped for question and answer. Ashraf, I think I got another 5 minutes. Sorry, Ashraf. I try my best to do. I hope I done justice. A little bit fast.
Alhamdulillah, thank you very much. To me, this is a very comprehensive as well as covering all the fundamentals and grounding the philosophical understanding as well as some of the four elements of the TE, which has been introduced in our first series organized by CPD. We conducted one of the first, we have 4 series. This is the second one. So the first one was by Prof. Dr. Shukran, who introduced to us these 4 concepts. And now Dr. Yusuf has somehow provided with the training, and we hopefully understand it. and then some of the fundamental ways of understanding how knowledge seeking and so on, and the 6 TE elements, which is principles in science that we can use. And once we have done this, and Dr. Yusuf did mention about how KCA has actually provided, I think many of us have received it, the guideline on the consolidation of TE in academic program. And if we fully follow what Dr. Yusuf has provided, then we will be able to address the 4 ways to integrate TE in course material, which is, if I just read it here, TE integration in course materials may include, but is not limited to, affirming that all knowledge originates from Allah. Second, establishing the Islamic worldview as the foundation for knowledge construction. So after we have done this, obviously it will lead towards understanding that everything is back to that worldview, emphasizing that the purpose of knowledge is ultimately to know, serve, and worship Allah. That also comes from ideologies. The values understanding, and then sorry, that is the purpose. Sorry, and then highlighting the relevance of Allah's beautiful names. So these are and attributes in the context of the discipline. For example, Al-Razzaq in economics, Al-Shafi in health sciences, Al-Adl for laws, and so on. So then it's kind of very easy to kind of show that we have already integrated. So thank you very much, Dr. Yusuf. We'll open to questions if there's any discussion, or if you would want Dr. Yusuf to further clarify and discuss and provide us with more insights. I welcome. We will allow for a 5-minute Q&A session. Anyone, you can either switch on your mic, or you can type it in the chat box, and I will read the questions for our speaker. Any questions? We will provide you with the recording. We'll email to you the sheet has been provided in the chat box, but we'll also add that the guidelines and provided by Dr. Yusuf, the 6 principles of TE. Any questions? We still have time, inshallah.
I'm not sure.
Assalamualaikum.
Yes, yes.
May
Yes.
I ask question, Doctor?
Yeah,
Okay,
silakan.
I'm Habibah from Physics Department, CFS, Gambang. So I need your opinion on regarding the assessment. Let's say we are now currently try to apply TE in our Physics 1 subject. So let's say we are going to do one assessment, and the assessment is about presentation, let's say. So the element of TE is evaluate in terms of application of the TE or understanding of the student in TE for the Physics 1 subject. And we are putting the rubric kind of whether student be able to relate their presentation and the physics application in daily life to TE concept. We are not going deep into the level of TE. Is it theory? Is it application? Is it understanding? It's just that student be able to relate or not. We give full mark. Cannot. We give only 1. The rubric is 1-3. Is it okay, Doctor? Because we just try. We just new, so we don't know whether this one is okay or not. So I need your opinion. Thank you.
Okay, first of all, the subject matter itself, we talk about physics, you talk about all those force and etc. Actually, for me, the idea of the one I presented now should be start even in CFS. Even in CFS, because it's not that difficult. If you see all the principles, actually it's easy. It's like using your rationale, right? So I believe you can implement that in CFS. First, on the subject matter itself. For example, you're talking about force, etc. But I know in physics, you have what we call the classical physics and the quantum physics, right? Quantum physics is different. Quantum physics, mashallah, is good because quantum physics, there are a lot of things that you cannot fathom by your mind. About the electron tunneling, about the superposition, about there's so many. There's good thing. That's why I put it there under number 5, the epistemic limitation of human being. Because
Unfortunately, we don't have quantum physics in foundation level, Doctor.
okay, I'm sorry. Okay. In that case, it's good. You're talking about things about forces, the electromagnetism, all those things, the projection, etc., and you can relate it to what I mentioned just now. It's dependent. You see, it's dependent to each other, right? So what I think the best thing is for the CFS, not just focus on ayatism. You can go one particular ayah and you can mention that, but go a little bit further, describe. And dependency is very simple to explain. Everything that you see in this world is dependent to others. Khalas. Right? So you talk about physics, you talk about all those forces that are coming together. They are dependent to each other, number one. Second, they must be precise, right? They must be precise, or else force cannot happen. Right? So you can, I think, the way I see in CFS, though you are, see, these things been tested in US, even at the level of schools, secondary schools. They were discussing about all those things. So and even we tested in CFS last time with Prof. Asim Barila, but there was a different set of issues. But you see, sometimes kita undermine our student though. Kita ingat our student ni, oh, level CFS tak boleh pergi. We can discuss. But of course, when you go for deeper level like physics, now you go about quantum mechanics, you talk about reality, you talk about string theory, which is not covered in CFS. Fine. Macam kita lah mathematics. You learn the basic mathematics, but calculus and everything you learn in university. So my idea is that I think in physics, application in foundation, not only the rubrics, not only mentioning the Quranic verse, but mentioning the understanding of it. Kan? So then, of course, just one or two ibrah they understand, for example, the level of dependency, can give mark for that. Itu yang pandangan saya lah, insyaAllah.
Thank you very much, Dr. Yusof. Any more questions? I'll just read. I think I saw one question from the chat box about, what was it? So some asking about the material. Yes, we will email to you after this talk.
I'm going to send the slides. You can just take it.
Okay, so there was one.
If I can
Yes.
say something about this.
Yeah,
I think what Dr. Yusof have already deliberated is very important, not only for Kuantan or science, but I believe for the university. And we also perhaps need to look into our academic framework. I think CPD has been tasked for that, because the previous, our Sejahtera academic framework has been there for the last 5 years, and that focus was more towards post-COVID era. So now I think to move forward, we might want to also look into our academic framework that can last another 5 to 10 years. So whatever Dr. Yusof mentioned just now, we can very good start, I believe. And after this, my suggestion is for the university, for us to deliberate and see what can we implement that structurally into our teaching and learning or our research. So the whole academic does not mean teaching only. It requires the whole ecosystem of our university. This is a very good, I believe, listen to you, so not only first time, but many times already. We just discussed also for Quanta and things like that. So, this is a very good session for everybody. But for lecturer, I believe many of us here don't really understand how to put that into practice, how to put that into course outline, how to assess, Yusof kata tak boleh assess iman, obviously cannot assess iman, but there are something, assessment must be there. It can be formative assessment, which is I like so much. The success is not based on grades. The success is based on our attempt. As you know about the hadith, you do something with your heart, with your hand, with your power, to those kind of things. So it's measured by the effort. So I believe this is very good that we try to realize this into our structured and strategic, bukan strategic, dipanggil apa, teaching academic initiative lah. So I hope we will not stop here, Dr. Ashraf. CPD can take the lead perhaps, and then there will be instruction inshallah coming from the top about this as well. So we can meet in the middle, that lecturers, especially lecturers, our friends, majority of our community are lecturers, our academicians. So we need to understand and we need to show it. And then if we don't understand, how can our student also understand eventually? So I really have a very hopeful about this. So I hope we can, this is a comment and also suggestion, but we don't really have to wait until we got the wahyu for us to start. We can start from now. But again, don't forget that it should not just narrative, rhetoric, it should be translated into practical element that all of us, the lecturers, our friends, able to really understand and grasp that. That's all my comment and my feedback. Yusuf, if you can, or Ashraf, thank you.
Thank you
Okay,
very much, Prof. Jamal.
just a simple comment, Dr. Ashraf. I really, mashallah, thank you very much, Prof. Jamal, for highlighting that. That's why I say I think this is the time has come for either CPD or ASIC when we start doing workshops. We just directly go because the concept now I think we discussed the concept so many times. So the time taken in the workshop later on, you just bring your course outline, bring your subject matter, and try to relate directly what you want to relate, right? The assessment, the rubrics, we can come up with that. I think that that's a good idea to mention. For example, in my case, I did in neuroscience, I did a case study, or I did a debate actually between my students about the issue of ruh, the issue of consciousness. The issue of consciousness. We know that the issue of consciousness and neuroscience, the philosophers and the scientists will debate. We thought that this is the higher level of discussion, but we can do that in ability of students. Just to mention to them, there are ontology, the reality of ruh, that not necessarily must be explained by science, right? Rather than we neglected this totally, and later on when some people asking about them about ruh and etc., they say that this is unscientific, this is must be rejected. No. Just because something is not scientific does not mean it doesn't have any value in terms of knowledge. That's the idea of Tawhidic. Itu yang pertama kan. So we can have debate, discussion. The only thing is how you frame that in assessment so that it become better, inshallah.
Thank you, Dr. Yusuf. Alhamdulillah, that's also among the reasons and with regards to the assessment component, we have organized and we have planned for this is what I'm showing you here is the trainings conducted by or planned the almanac from CPD. So I'd like to highlight on the series that I mentioned just now, the 4 series that we've planned. Actually, the Dr. Yusuf's today's session is actually intended to be a 3rd series. The second one is, if you can see from this, this is from CPD website. So developing and operationalizing TE in the IOM curriculum. This was intended to be before the series, showing some of the TEs in different courses in IIUM so that everyone can see kind of a larger bird's eye view. But that there's certain reason that we need to delay that one. So we are now doing this part, integrating Tawhidic epistemology in courses. So more of what had been delivered by Dr. Yusuf. And inshallah, we'll have the 4th series, where is it? On assessment, which this one. So somebody also asked about how do we assess, and alhamdulillah, Prof. Jamal had also mentioned about how much important it is, and kind of also given another burden to us to feel the pressure of some of the challenges that we're having. So inshallah, we are planning to have this planned on, what was the date, but somewhere end of this year in the October. So we will, some of the speakers, we have potential speakers would be from the Kuliah of Education. So we're looking forward for this. If you have any inputs also, we welcome for further inputs. You can just contact me if you have any kind of concerns and so on. But yes, alhamdulillah, it's in the pipeline, and hopefully we welcome everyone to check our CPD website also on the dates, but some would be changed if there are certain issues with the speaker or certain other issues that we don't foresee. But inshallah, hopefully we would have many participants joining us so that we can further bake and implement TE in our courses, inshallah, to make it fully following the academic framework that we have. I think we don't have much time for discussions. I think all...
Can I interject very quickly?
Yes, Prof. Jesni, is it?
I'm Jesni. Very quick interjection. Sorry. Thank you, Yusuf. It was quite an interesting talk, although I think some aspects of it, especially when we talk about ontology and epistemology, some aspects of it could benefit from a little bit more precision, especially when you talk about contingency with respect to Ibn Sina. I think the history can be traced back a little bit way back earlier through Plotinus, and from Plotinus he was deriving it from, I think, Aristotle and so forth. But never mind, for the imprecisions or the precisions we can always discuss over coffee, which I think you should owe me a cup of coffee for since the many months that you promised me. I'm making it public now, so you have to buy me coffee sometime soon. But more importantly, this idea of TE is something that in our faculty we are taking it rather seriously. It's great, alhamdulillah, that my HOD has initiated this thing, where we have a committee to look into it. And we're looking at it not at a level of superficial, nothing like that. It's definitely deeper. And we're thinking about how to embed the entire program, and more importantly, to understand how a program like physics could actually benefit students learning it, could benefit from TE. And it has to be, like it or not, something universal beyond the aspect of, if I could use such a word as if it's a label, beyond the aspect of Islam per se, because TE, I think you would agree with me, is beyond Quran. Quran was revealed to Muhammad SAW, and before him, many prophets were already there. The idea of Tawheed has been around. Okay, we can debate and argue historically how Tawheed is to be understood during the time of Musa alayhi salam, for example. Is it identical to the way Muhammad SAW understood it? That's a different debate, arguably. But the essence of saying Tawhidic epistemology is constrained to Quran, I think it's a little bit, in my honest opinion, cheapening it to some extent. It has to be grander, and it has to actually allow for the program to enrich students so that they could, in my case, learn physics proper, not physics as subjects, but physics as a program. And that's what we're doing. We submitted a proposal actually to OSCE. I'm very sorry, CPD, we did not know to whom we should submit it to. So we submitted to Shukran, Prof. Shukran. He passed it on to the person, another professor, good professor. He was looking at it. He gave his comments, his feedback, and we're supposed to improve on it. So I was hoping that such a grand enterprise like TE for courses, for programs in the university could benefit from discussions between the members of the faculties and the central agencies, in this sense, CPD or SIT, if you will. I would think it would be great if we could sit down. I'm not speaking for any other program. I'm only speaking for my program because I'm very selfish. So I only care about physics. I think it would benefit physics if we could sit and talk, because I'm not sure if I can completely agree with the 6 elements that you mentioned. I'm not saying they're wrong, but I'm not sure if it sits completely well or if it's completely coherent and congruent to our interests of TE in our program, at least within the context of our interpretation. So with that, I would hope that maybe there's room for that, rather than we have a top-down perspective, which I mean at the end feel that it's something that in a jest I would say Muhammad himself may probably shiver at if I'm allowed that joke. Na'udzubillah. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Prof. Jesse. I just like to maybe respond first about mentioning, CPD is not the owner for the TE. You are correct when you send the proposal to OSIT, that's actually correct, as well as Centris. So those are So those are the two institutes or centers that are the ones who has the authority. With regards to you mentioning about the guidelines, I think CPD, among the things that we do is we collaborate with the centers who are responsible to deliver these initiatives from our university top down. Some of it we identify the speakers who are involved in the works on TE. I think with regards to the 6 principles that has been developed by Dr. Yusuf, I don't think that is more of a top-down, but it's one of the examples that is being used by Dr. Yusuf himself as a lecturer and then as a trainer, but not something that is kind of a concrete that everyone needs to follow 100%. Some of the things that is in the guideline, if we can follow, is the consolidated guideline by KCA, which I just read just now, the 4 items on how we can use. Even OSIT themselves are still in the process now, conducting workshops through the office by Prof. Zaid. So Prof. Zaid is the unit under OSIT that is in charge with the TE initiatives or the TE efforts throughout our university, not just entirely with regards to curriculum, but also covering some other aspects beyond that. So for us CPD, we are mostly anchoring our training particularly on curriculum, so teaching and learning. So that's among the reasons why if you see the concepts on TE is mostly emphasizing curriculum perspective, not maybe on the environment and so on. Again, yes, you mentioned about the whether we have room for discussion and so on. So I think that's something that we need to do time by time. Dr. Yusuf wants to respond
Yeah,
something?
just a simple one. Of course, Prof. Jesti, mashallah, I'm thinking of listening to his view, who has a very strong background in philosophy and etc. As I mentioned, this is a very beginner level. This is not a dogma. This is not something that we should be enforcing to all of us. Of course, each kuliah can take up, can add up, can I mean, modify it accordingly. So this is not something that you should becoming a dogma. So yes, we encourage for discussion. We can for differences, for even for debate, that's fine, inshallah, as long as we do it in the correct in the wonderful way. For example, is it TE is only confined to Quran? This is good discussion on that topic as well. Or whether Aristotle actually influenced, I mean, Ibn Sina influenced by Aristotle in making contingency. This is a good thing. But of course, Prof. Jasni, your level is different, mashallah. So here, competency is beginner. But it's good, inshallah. It's a stepping stone. The time will come, inshallah.
Thank you very much, Dr. Yusuf. Thank you, Prof. Jasni, and thank you also to Prof. Jamal joining our session. Alhamdulillah, the campus director for IIM Kuantan. Alhamdulillah, and thank you to everyone joining the session. It's a fruitful session, and hopefully it doesn't stop here. And we welcome further discussion, debates to further improve, and hopefully this kind of provides shows that we are now further engaging into implementing TE more seriously after everyone has kind of understood the basics and maybe kind of the intermediate level. We are now going into gearing up towards understanding it more fully, inshallah. Let's before we end our session, let's switch on our cameras and take a group photo, inshallah. I welcome everyone to switch on your camera, your webcam, and then take a group photo. Okay, so we'll capture just the three first pages. Sister Alhana, can you take the photo? We don't have much time.
Okay. Page 1, smile.
Okay.
Okay, page 2. What do I know?
The last page.
Okay, page 3. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much once again, everyone. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. We'll see you in the next trainings by CPD. Let's adjourn with Tasbih Kafarah and Suratul Asr. Thank you. Assalamualaikum.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.